Hey, hi! Welcome to Someone Else's Movie, the original podcast where an actor, writer, director, or nebulous industry figure gives a little love to a movie they didn't make. I'm Norm Wilner, senior film writer for Now Magazine, and this is the other thing I do. My guest this week is actor, writer, and producer Jennifer Dale, whose roles in the feature films Suzanne, Ticket to Heaven, and Of Unknown Origin launched a career that spanned every medium and genre. She's worked with Adam Egoyan on The Adjuster, John Woo on the English-language versions of Once a Thief, to Clement Virgo on Love Come Down, to April Mullen on Gravy Train. If you grew up in the 90s, you knew Jennifer as the voice of Mystique in the animated X-Men series and the video game X-Men Mutant Academy, and recently you might have caught her in Akash Sherman's Clara, Corey Stanton's Robbery, or Andrew DeAngelis' sadly short-lived comedy What Would Sal Do? She stars in the new film Into Invisible Light, which she co-wrote with director Sheila Carter, and it opens theatrically this Friday, February 1st, in Toronto, Winnipeg, and Vancouver. Jennifer picked I Am Love, Luca Guadagnino's 2009 drama of love and betrayal among the aristocracy, with Tilda Swinton following her Oscar win for Michael Clayton as Emma, the Russian-born wife of a wealthy Italian clan who risks destabilizing her comfortable world and everything in it when she's drawn to a friend of her son's. Embraced as much for his artful reference points and sumptuously realized production design as for Swinton's devastating performance, it launched Guadagnino on the career path that would lead to A Bigger Splash, Call Me By Your Name, and, well, Suspiria. I'll forgive that one. This is Someone Else's Movie.
First of all, it was very much in my mind as an inspiration for the film that I have just completed with Sheila Carter, Into Invisible Light, because when she and I started to talk about what we wanted to do, we spent a great deal of time talking about the actresses, the performances, the kinds of women's protagonist roles that inspired us, that resonated with us. And Tilda Swinton in this movie was definitely at the top of the list.
Okay.
But I remember very clearly when I first saw even just the trailer for this film, I got so excited. I thought, oh my God, somebody has made a movie just for me. I mean, I was so excited by it because the idea of an actress, an English-speaking actress acting in Italian
And Russian,
playing a Russian character whose second language is Italian. Well, I don't know if you know, but I am actually half Italian. I have an Italian background. My real last name is Ciurluini, and I've studied the language for about 12 years now, so it's very important to me. And to sort of watch somebody doing that in a film was really quite a feat and very impressive. And also, the beauty of it. There's so many things about this movie that I love. I don't even know where to begin. I've listened to a lot of interviews in the last few days, also with the director, Luca Guadagnino, and with Tilda Swinton. And I think one of the things that I'm so inspired by is their relationship, the process, the relationship that they have as collaborators. You know, that they did a short film together. For the first thing that they did together was a short film called The Love Factory, which I couldn't find. You can't find it anywhere.
Yeah, it must be on a...
Yeah, but it's a film that's apparently like just a close-up of her talking into the camera about love. And while they were editing that, they were talking about what they wanted to do next and extrapolating the idea. And they took a long time to come up with it, right?
I mean, this was an 11-year gestation process.
An 11-year gestation. And I mean, he does not consider her to be his muse, per se, because a muse he would think of as a kind of a passive role, right? And Tilda is clearly very much a collaborator and a worker and, in at the ground level and helping him to create the very story that they wanted to create. He said that he wanted to make something for a long time about the decadence of the bourgeoisie but also and what a masquerade it is, but also how they have to be prepared for a revolution from within that.
Yes. Well, he cited The Leopard, Visconti's The Leopard, a number of times as a visual inspiration at least.
Yes.
And there is that sense of the sort of reckoning that his cinema is having with the cinema of the Italian new wave auteurs from the 60s as well.
That's right.
This is a response to that as much as the bourgeoisie response to its own infiltration. It's
Yes.
It's a snake eating its tail on 3 or 4 different levels.
I mean, he takes references from The Leopard. His character Tancredi Recchi is also the name Tancredi of the character that Alain Delon plays in The Leopard, Il Leopardo, and also he talked about that there is great beauty and dignity in the maintaining of the traditions of that kind of a family, but that it is this tragedy of denial in a way, because it's a movie about all these people trying to deny their feelings for various different reasons, which is so interesting.
Yeah, the emotional impact of it is something that the first time I saw it, I think I felt as though I was watching an Italian Greenaway. Somebody who was doing the thing that Peter Greenaway does in his movies in the 90s and leading up to maybe the 80s and 90s. Zed and Two Knots, Cook the Thief, His Wife and Her Lover, were just these elaborate depictions of decadence that are also rotting from within, and they're metaphorically rotting, but they're also literally rotting, all of that stuff. With I Am Love, there's a sense that it's about to start rotting, but it hasn't yet, and that there's still a possibility of everything maybe being, if not salvaged, then at least escaped.
Right.
And so you're watching this family fall apart in almost real time because of the conflicts that you mentioned, because of the things that people can't allow themselves to do or have.
And because there is this illusion that's set up from the very beginning, right, of a cohesive thing, right, that's all so interlocking and dependent on each other, right?
Sure.
And yet it is an illusion, right? But it's beautifully presented, so we're not quite sure that that's what we're looking at from the outset, right? I mean, the opening of the film with the incredible music of John Adams, which I didn't realize until yesterday. I heard Guadagnino talking about the fact that the music was not actually written for the film, that it was already pre-existing music, which I find so interesting. And it almost has a kind of Stravinsky feel to it, those operatic, and there's that music is like, you can feel that it's music that's saying there's a change coming, something's on the move here, right? Can wait for it, watch for it, building, exactly. And against the scape of Milan in the dead of winter, with the frozen architecture and everything frigid and covered in layers of ice, and the streets empty and nobody about. It's like everybody's in hiding somehow. And then we go and then those credits. Yeah,
very, very elaborate in their presentation, and over enunciating almost in text somehow.
Yeah, they're like old Visconti and Antonioni credits, or even old Hollywood melodramas.
Cirque was a reference point,
right?
Too.
Yes, very much that. And then we come to the house, which is we're on the outside of it, and we're just looking in through the windows, right? And we're this other world, and the house itself, which is not very homey looking. I mean, it's magnificent, but it's kind of like an industrial fortress in a way, right?
It's still very gray, and there's a lot of space that's just there to loom in. I think.
Right, exactly.
And we experience it through people bustling around and preparing things.
The first people we see are the servants, and Emma working with the servants. She's polishing a little bowl that's gold on the inside, and she looks like she could well be one of the maids herself. And then the one of the other really interesting elements that he uses in this film is food, and what food means. How food is is a gift. The making of food is always a gift. Right from the first scene that we see her son, Eduardo Ido, coming home for this festa that's in preparation for the patrone, for the nonno. Mm-hmm. And Emma has made for her eldest son his favorite soup, the famous fish soup, the Russian fish soup. And we see that it's such a delight for him, because it's like specially made for him, her gift to him, right? And then we start to establish the family as everybody starts to arrive for this compleanno, the birthday party, right? And we start to be introduced to the various characters and the relationships, and it's all very intriguing and interesting, these relationships.
Yeah, you can tease it out. On second viewing, it was much more obvious, but the actors have clearly thought very long and very hard about the relationships to each other in character, and you can tell who's comfortable with which relative and which people might have had a fight more recently, and it's that sort of slow steeping in a family dynamic that most movies do with dialogue now, and do very clumsily, like, Eddie, I'm your brother, I've known you forever, and all that stuff. And this just lets it all manifest.
Yes.
And I'm always surprised that the film is as short as it is. I always remember it as being longer. I think that's the leopard in my head. It's it's always 3 hours long, but it's just 2 hours.
Yes.
And even though we're 10 minutes in at this point, we're still zipping along.
Yes. And while everyone is arriving, there's that marvelous moment where Tilda is putting on her makeup at her toilette table, and Tancredi comes in and he says, "Sono arrivati," they've arrived. Mm-hmm. And she gets up and he goes to the safe and he takes out the bracelet and the ring that he puts on her. And as he's putting them on her, it's like he's handcuffing her, right? It's a very strange moment. And she kisses him, and off she's on the run. This is a really functional, everybody's got their role to play, right?
But we also see the transactional nature of their relationship. It's just summed up so beautifully in that moment of our realizing, because she knows it already, who has the power, who holds the actual power in the relationship.
Right. And I mean, in some sense, even though she has been brought in as a member of this family and is loved in their way, she's still an outsider and will always be that, in a sense.
Yeah, the film is never cruel about the way that it sees their relationship to her, but we're also never really allowed to forget, as you say, that there is that gap there. Yeah. And it's doubly reinforced to me by having it be Swinton, who we know is not Italian. Some part of your brain is always just marveling at Tilda Swinton speaking Italian and Russian, but it works to separate the character from the others, from the native Italian speakers surrounding her as well. It's this excellent casting instinct, which both Guadagnino and Swinton clearly had, because she had to know she could do this. Yes,
absolutely. Great faith that he had in her for that. I love that. But I wonder too, though, whether or not Marissa Berenson is not a native Italian.
No, she
may well speak it.
I've seen her speak Italian and French, actually, now that I think about it.
Okay, but I mean, well, and it's always the thing when they're speaking that kind of very pure Italian, right? I mean, it's not like, say, the dialect that we're now watching in the beautiful my brilliant friend, thing, right? In the Neapolitan or so many other Italian films where even though you're studying the language, you can't understand a word they're saying. You can very clearly understand this Italian, right? Yeah,
they're speaking very formally and very elegantly. It's about bearing. It's about education. It's about money.
Yes,
obviously they are at a how can I say it? They're elite. They are the elite. They're the perfected version of themselves, or at least that's the image they want to present.
Yes. So then the first clue that we get that something has changed, something is different, is the fact that morning first son, Ido, in a race, has broken a long-standing Recchi family tradition by losing a race to someone. And
It's not sitting well.
It's not sitting well. Nobody makes a big fuss about it, but you can clearly see that it's, they're rather disgruntled. And then the other thing that's going on is that the daughter, Beta, is in a secondary room with her boyfriend, who's trying to make out with her, take her pants off, and she's trying to be polite about it, but she's really not having any, and gets him off of her, and then she comes in to give her gift to her nonno, which he's expecting to be another painting, and it's not. It's a photograph, which is the new art that she wants to pursue. And so he's also put off a little bit by that. He tries to pretend that he's happy about it, but he doesn't like novelty.
Yeah, it is wonderful to introduce a family that gives paintings to each other as a matter of course.
Yes,
and
absolutely.
have us still like them.
Yes.
Because that is the most
Yes.
detached bourgeois thing I can...
Yeah.
Like, how do you even try to connect to the real world when that is your standard?
Yes.
There's no association. This might as well be taking place in the 1940s, or in the 1930s. It's funny, I got a real Garden of the Finzi-Continis vibe from it at certain points, about people who are living a life that they don't know is about to end.
Yes.
This won't happen because of their ethnicity or their wealth. It's just their time is ending.
Yes.
And it's moving. The world is moving past what they do.
Yes.
And of course someone loses a race because there are better people out there.
Right.
It's inevitable.
Right.
But they don't know that, and they're going to great lengths to deny it.
Yes. There's another little detail at that dinner, as everyone's sitting down, that I thought was very interesting and telling. When the servants are pouring their wine around to the glasses, the girl who's been brought to the family for the first time as Ido's girlfriend, it's just a moment. You'd almost miss it if you weren't paying attention. But when they go to pour at her glass, she just puts up her hand to say no. And it's just an interesting detail, right? Yeah. She's the girl who wants to be accepted into the family, so she's going to do everything right. She's not going to have any wine with this meal, right? I loved all those little details. But and you know what else I love? The audaciousness of the title.
Yes.
Right? I mean, I Am Love. Like, who does that? Who makes a movie and calls it that? Well, Luca Guadagnino, clearly. Sure. But, I mean, to do that, it's without getting into a whole conversation about what love is, but, it's really audacious, that. I think.
Well, the whole film is declarative in that way. I mean, even the lifts from Cirque and Visconti and Antonioni, he's outright stealing in tribute. It's not, and it's not perceived as an act of theft.
No. It's
his second feature, and he just steps right up and says, no, I'm at this level, I'm functioning here, and I'm capable of doing this. And it's a back foot moment, certainly for people who aren't ready to be, who aren't ready to give him the benefit of the doubt, I would say. I certainly had a few minutes with it while I was watching it. I'm just trying to figure out exactly how much rope I should give this guy, because it's a pretty glaring statement, and his cinema is lush and detail oriented in a way that I sometimes find annoying. Certainly the expert recreation of 1976 Berlin in Suspiria is something that I don't think serves the film in the slightest, but I'm forced to watch every piece of stone be laid, and all of these details are put in front of you while you watch the film, and you really don't have a choice. But to be trapped in it. In I Am Love, it absolutely works, because he's building a world that maybe never existed, as opposed to this weird photorealistic obsession he has with moving Argento's film away from this impressionistic, bizarre, day-glow mise-en-scène into something more realistic. Here, he's creating a world that is as heightened as Cirque's or as Visconti's, because that's the level, that's the world these people think they live in, and so the film reflects it. And then we get to watch it come apart from the inside. And that's part of the statement of the film, which works very, very effectively. In this case, not so much in Suspiria.
So I haven't seen Suspiria, but let me ask you. So, I mean, I'm so impressed by Guadagnino's directing ability with actors too. Sure. And obviously he is working with some of the greatest actors living, but he clearly must have a rapport with them that draws out of them these performances. I mean, it's not only Tilda in this movie or in A Bigger Splash.
Sure.
It's Ralph Fiennes in A Bigger Splash, who was extraordinary, and Timothée Chalamet in Call Me By Your Name. You know, I've actually said this before to several people. I think that Timothée Chalamet in that movie does something that will remain with me forever as one of the greatest acting moments of all time. Do you remember?
Which moment?
Do you remember? It's a scene, it's about 3/4 of the way through the film. The relationship is already quite established. I think they have already consummated their relationship, and they are meeting on their bikes in the piazza, I think, and they come together, and he comes up to him like he's going to give him a hug or a kiss or something, and he does this little leap of goofy kind of joy and ecstasy that is, it just takes your breath away. I will never forget that. It was so beautiful.
I do remember that. That's the last thing you expect in that moment. That
yes.
little cultish leap. Yeah.
Yes, it was wonderful.
Yeah. No, I think as a filmmaker, he can get people to trust him, because the stuff that he gets Swinton and Dakota Johnson to do in Suspiria is very complicated and painful and difficult, and they wouldn't have done it if they didn't trust him and believe that it would work. But even something that as simple and just as beautiful as trusting the entirety of Call Me By Your Name to come down to that final monologue from a character who's been very still and almost not present for most of the film, and just knowing that Michael Stuhlbarg can land that monologue after just sort of being half present for the entire film, and in that moment that it will work. It's that trust game of casting and directing and acting, and I have a weird hole in my heart for Call Me By Your Name, just because I feel that there should be more tension somehow. It's a movie that's very, very safe in its storytelling, that it just tells you what's going to happen and then it happens, which is a little less interesting, I think. But that monologue is among the most impressive things in any of Guadagnino's films. It's just, it completely reframes the film. It completely reformats the film. It would be like Swinton having a big speech at the end of I Am Love, but it's not necessary, right?
No.
We don't need it in this case. Speaking
of her speeches, though, the only time we hear her talking in long passages, we're not ever actually seeing her, right? She's doing other things. I just noticed that because I was rewatching parts of it this morning, and when she's speaking at length about her past, where she came from, how she was brought into the family, and she's involved with her lover by this point, and we see them engaged in other things, but all of that is voiceover. She's never sort of on camera talking at length to anybody, and she is a character with a very profound and well-developed interior life, obviously, but she's not particularly communicative ever with anyone.
I was wondering if that was, I'm sure it's deliberate again to set her apart, but I was wondering if it's because she's never trusted her family with herself. If we're supposed to infer that she's always she is as present as she is, and she sees everything and nothing gets past her, but I wonder if she just doesn't communicate that. Possibly because she is an outsider and doesn't feel like her, again, if everything she does is based on being allowed to do something, why would she go any further? There would be a part of her that she keeps to herself.
Right.
And of course, that's the part that comes out in the affair. That's the part that we see expressed with someone else who sees her differently.
Yes.
And that's all
There's someone else, the chef.
Yes.
Who arrives that evening at the dinner.
The fateful meeting.
With another gift, right? Ho portato una torta, right? I brought you a cake.
Thank you for saying it so I don't have to struggle with it.
And he's the fellow that has won the race in the morning, which is another interesting touch, right? Mm-hmm. And now he's brought this cake to Ido, and that's when they meet ever so briefly. But then she disappears and goes upstairs to her room. As she does at these events, she tends to withdraw.
She removes herself,
and stays,
exactly.
in her own private space. Sometimes with Ida, her housekeeper, who is also a very fascinating character because she's the one who seems to hold the whole emotional life of the family. She holds it and she deflects it, right? And people, it's not that they really reveal a lot to her, but they feel safe with her, right? Mm. There's a moment later in the movie where Ido breaks down in tears on her shoulder, right? When things are beginning to shake up for him.
Yeah. Well, she's always been present for them, right?
Yeah.
In a way that maybe other parental figures have not. Yeah. And it's not an indictment of anybody. It seems like that's just the way the house runs. All of these parts are moving without the family's involvement.
Yes.
So they're there, they're present, they're always there. And then, of course, you take them for granted. And then, of course, you realize what they mean. They can witness things without affecting them.
Yes.
So maybe she's a safer person to confess to.
Yes.
Or
yes.
be present in front of. And it's just, again, it's one of those things that's in the film but never really explained or investigated. It's simply part of the surface that you're presented with.
So then, I also love the change of the seasons, how the whole story moves. We're alcuni mesi fa, several months later, right? And now it's spring. And Tilda's going to the dry cleaners, where she happens to be given something that was left in a jacket, and it's a letter CD that her daughter Beta has written to her brother to tell him that she's fallen in love with a girl.
Right.
And this is a great, strange thing for Tilda, but not. It doesn't seem disturbing. She's just fascinated by it, right?
Mm-hmm. Well, it's the possibility of another life, right?
Yes.
I mean, that whole recurring theme of choosing differently.
Yes.
Her children are doing it. She's wondering whether she's capable of it herself. And I mean, I suppose we can go all the way into spoiler territory. It's a 10-year-old movie and people will hopefully have seen it by now, but the world does choose for Emma sometimes. Other people's actions allow her to find a path.
Yeah,
but
that's true.
In this moment where she's presented with this thing that is potentially scandalous, it's potentially presumably upsetting, or movies have taught us that we should be upset when this moment happens because a parent is finding out a secret, but it doesn't. You're right, it doesn't play that way. It's simply a possibility.
Yes. And by this time, Ido and the chef are friends, and they have a plan to open a restaurant together. And there's another party that's being planned for an announcement of an engagement between Ido and his girlfriend. And, of course, Antonio is the chef. I think that's his name,
I believe so,
Yes, yeah. Antonio. He's going to do the food for the party. And when Emma comes home and he's in preparation for the food with all these beautiful little things laid out on the table, she's so enamored of just seeing them. And then they meet again as he's using this little blowtorch to put on something that he's creating, and then Ido is there and introduces them again, and they get Emma to use the blowtorch, and you see them connecting over their appreciation of food, right?
And the work involved.
And the work
we've seen her putting that work in as well, so that's part of it too.
Yes.
And I find myself wondering if Guadagnino sees himself as Antonio, like the specific fussiness of the craftsman, because so many of his films feel very, very, handmade in a way that cinema rarely does, where you're just lingering on details because we are supposed to notice them and appreciate them. It was again the thing that pulled at me watching Suspiria. Is look how meticulous this is, and there are moments of it in Call Me by Your Name, but it feels more organic to the story because that's about observing and noticing and appreciating. And here it's the effort that bonds them.
Yes, absolutely.
And starts them down that road.
And soon after, there is that wonderful scene where Emma goes with Allegra, her mother-in-law, who's by now a widow, and the daughter-in-law to be for lunch at the restaurant where Antonio works, and he gives them each a different dish, and he gives her this plate of crustaceans something. So I read someone said it's like she's having oral sex with a plate of crustaceans. Well, yeah. They call it sort of gastro prawn.
I'll allow it.
But it's quite gorgeously shot. I mean, she's in that red dress, and then of course, well, to speak of her dress, I mean, her wardrobe throughout the entire film is just so evocative and making a statement in every scene very clearly about her evolution, right?
Yeah, and Swinton is such a physically present actor too that you're really just nice. All you need to do is put on a nice hat and she'll stand out. But this is, 2 or 3 levels above.
But she's also a tremendous fashion icon and fashionista, and so she has the greatest designers, Rafe Simons for Jill Sander creating a whole line for her in this, right?
Yeah.
Anyway, the scene in the restaurant, she's eating these prawns and she's having like a total revelatory experience, right? And then he comes out and we see that she can barely even make eye contact with him because she's so impressed. It's almost like she's just had this little mini orgasm eating his food. Can't look him in the eye. And then she compliments him when outside and learns that he goes up to San Remo, where the farm is, on Thursdays to take care of the planting up there and everything. And sometime later she ends up going to visit with her children, having to go through San Remo to get to Nice, and happens to see him. Right.
These things just happen. No orchestration involved.
It doesn't matter. Yes.
But exactly, it's.
And then another homage, that very Hitchcockian sort of chase scene, right? Where who's the predator, who's being followed, who's being watched, right?
But in a playful sort of pursuit. There's dramatic tension, but it's not suspenseful. It's actually just pleasurable to watch this, which is, I think, the thing that at this point we're co-conspirators.
Absolutely.
The film is inviting us to root for this.
It's like a foreplay, and then she agrees to go with him on the drive up to the farm in the hills of San Remo. Beautiful drive into the heat. You can feel the heat, right? And they get up there and she's in that orange dress and takes off her sweater and goes to sit while he goes to freshen up. And then he comes back and you don't even see it, right? It's all blurred, and you see her from the back and him kind of reaching in for this kiss, and it's all blurred, and it's like everything has changed.
It's a texture to it. It's a sensual cinema that defines all of his films, really. I mean, even Suspiria, even A Bigger Splash are films about place and time and people, and A Bigger Splash, you can sort of smell the salt water in the air, and the Suspiria tries very hard to be gritty, and you can sort of sense the tension and despair of Berlin shaking itself apart while all this stuff is going on. And Call Me By Your Name is idyllic, and this film is similarly in awe of everything it's seeing while waiting for the chance to dive into it, right? This is the culmination. This is the moment where the movie actually lets people feel something.
Yes.
And up until that point, it's been discouraging it.
Yes.
And I think this, just as we've been sort of brought along to Emma's desires, we're also now in a position to root for them and enjoy the rest of it with her, rather than worry that she's going to make the wrong decision. If this is the wrong decision, it still looks like she's enjoying herself.
She looks so much like she's enjoying herself when she comes back from that encounter and races into her bathroom and sits on the toilet, and there's the close-up of her. She's just like she's like a little kid who's just opened her Christmas present. She's just so thrilled. And it reminded me of another moment in a movie like that, but that is played very, very differently, and that also for me remains as one of the great acting moments of all time, is Diane Lane in Unfaithful, because she comes home from her encounter with a lover for the first time and is riding on the train, and it's all played in close-up on her, and the gamut of emotions that she goes through.
At one point, doesn't she?
Yeah, it's very Eleanor Duse, that, the blush. I love it. But yes, she blushes, she cries, she laughs, she's thrilled, but, you know, she's also realized the enormity of the horrible thing that she's done and what it's going to cause, whereas Tilda, in this film, there's no presaging of that.
No
it's
regret.
all no regret.
No guilt.
No regret. And from this point, you know, things are just moving forward. Even though she's still within the family, you can see her knowing that things are going to change. Things are going to change. You see her in a beautiful scene talking with her husband in their, you know, quiet, measured tones, her wearing the purity of all white still, haha, and right,
just playing the role.
Yeah, but then you see her walking through her house, and she's touching things, and you realize she's saying goodbye to everything. I recognized that so clearly. I mean, I literally recognized that moment, having lived through that kind of experience where you're walking through the house you're going to leave and saying, leaving all of this behind.
Yeah. It's, again, you know, it's not where I thought this movie was going to go when I first saw it. It's not, I didn't expect the depth of feeling, I suppose.
Yeah.
Because it presents itself as such a grand production that you're going to be staring at all the lavish, you know, it's a textiles movie. You're looking at the wall hangings, and then suddenly you realize you're invested in the emotions of the people inside.
Yes.
And that and as we talked about earlier, that the destruction of this family isn't coming from a revolution. It's just moving on.
Yeah.
Things have
but
changed.
It is a revolution in a way, of a very personal revolution from the deepest part of somebody, right?
And I guess you need to, I mean, it's responsible in a strange way to show the level of comfort that she has to make us understand why she'd be willing to leave it.
Yes.
For that depth of feeling that she has.
Yes. And then we have the sections where the movie breathes into that love affair. Although all of those sex scenes, you feel kind of like, I'm not supposed to be here. They're so private.
Yeah.
You know, the way he shoots it over the shoulder of Antonio and just his back while he's talking intimately to her. And you just feel like, oh, this is just their thing and I shouldn't be watching.
I was trying to figure out the last time I watched it if we're supposed to be tense about that, if it's supposed to feel like surveillance and maybe they'll be exposed or found out and we're supposed to have some sort of tension. But I don't know that that's it. I think it's just how he's depicting intimacy. We shouldn't be there.
Because I don't think she has that sense, even, you know, because then there's much later, leading towards the climax of the film, there's another big dinner in her home when the Shah from London is coming and the company is being sold or, you know, merging or something. Big change to the family and the company. And she's there, you know, greeting those guests and at part of that dinner, and then she just suddenly gets up like a sleepwalker or somebody hypnotized, and again that camera follows her, that long tracking shot down the stairs and into the kitchen where Antonio is cooking, and she just goes and stands there and he just comes to her and they kiss, and it's kind of like anybody could see them, right? I mean, she's not even trying to hide it at this point.
No, she wants it to be over.
She wants it to be over. She's
ready to move on.
And it will be very quickly.
But not the way
she would have wanted.
Yeah.
So Ido has been up to the farm since looking for Antonio at one point and has seen this long blonde hair on the cobblestone because Antonio has cut all of Emma's hair off, and so he has something going on in the back of his mind, and then this fish soup is served. I just want to go back. There's also a scene in that space where, we know she knows it's going to be over soon, but she's in bed with her husband, and she's watching Philadelphia. Tom Hanks, in that scene where he's listening to the Maria Callas aria, which is from Adrienne Le Chenier, I think is the opera, and the song, the aria, is called La Mamma è Morte. And she's there, right? The mother is dead, and she's there in bed with her husband and just saying, I'm tired, and rolling over, right? But then we go to that dinner, and the fish soup, which Emma has told Antonio about while they were making love in his cottage, this dish that is Ido's favorite, Antonio has made for this dinner. And the servants bring it all out and put it on the table, and Ido understands instantly what's going on and gets up from the table, and Emma follows him out to the pool where they argue, and he says, that's it for me. I don't ever want to have anything to do with you again. And he gets up, and she grabs his arm, and he trips and cracks his head on the cement of the pool and falls in the pool, and everything is utter devastation from there on.
It's the end of everything, really. I mean, it shatters the entire family, as it would.
Yeah.
But it feels earned in the film, right? I mean, it's a melodramatic ending for someone, but it does feel like it's of a piece with the larger emotional aesthetic, if that makes any sense. It's a big operatic death.
Yes. But it's still a tremendous shock. It's a great shock. And from that moment, I mean, everything seems to happen very quickly. Yeah. Even though it feels like a terrible, protracted sequence through the hospital, as they realize that he's not going to make it and he dies. And then they're at the funeral, and she goes off to that chapel by herself.
Which is another sort of old film classical imagery. I thought of Powell and Pressburger and Black Narcissus and things like that. Just the idea of, or Vertigo, setting a scene in a chapel where there's no escaping what's happening, where you're locked in there with yourself.
And just the birds. The birds that are, the pigeons or whatever that are flying up in the rafters. And then Tancredi comes in to find her and puts her shoes back on again. There's a lot of that too in the movie. People putting on the clothes and taking off the clothes, and he puts her shoes back on, and he puts his jacket on her because she looks so vulnerable and wet and cold. And she just tells him, Io amo Antonio. She just says it. And he goes to take her jacket, and she thinks he's going to hit her. And he just says, you don't exist, and walks away. I mean, it's just so black and white and sudden, right? No discussion, right? No waffling on her part about, am I going to tell him or not? And he said, that's it. Yeah, get out of here.
If it was a musical, this would be the greatest, the crescendo of it. It's the moment where they simply have to be true to each other, or honest with each other, rather. And it annihilates the relationship. Yeah. Although I was trying to figure out this time, is I guess he letting her go? Does he know? And I don't think he is. I think it's just it's a dismissal.
It's a dismissal, definitely. Yeah. And that's why she just runs back to the house where the family's still all gathered there in the living room, and they see her coming across the lawn, and she just runs up the stairs and has that frantic packing moment with Ida. And that moment when I guess Ida understands what's going on somehow.
Oh, I'm sure she always has. Right?
Yeah, and they embrace in this, like, this cry and that's the moment when your heart just explodes. I mean, for me to think of that, that's the thing that sent me over the edge, right? And then she's gone. She comes back down the stairs and has one moment looking at her daughter, and then she's out the door. That's it.
Yeah. Yeah. And we are left behind as well, right?
Yes.
I mean, that's the thing that it resists the epilogue, it resists the happy ending, or even a tragic ending. It's over now. This is the end of the family.
He
it's the end of
does
the movie.
tag on that very little epilogue-like scene over the credits of Antonio and Emma in this grotto-like cave.
Yeah,
right?
I want to think that's a fantasy. I mean, I think that's her dream, that just finding peace with him somewhere.
Yeah.
But you're right, it could be. I mean, the rest of the film has been so stylized that it might as well be real.
Yeah.
But I don't know. I want to wonder. The same way I don't want a sequel to Call Me by Your Name, even though apparently they're planning several.
Oh, you're kidding.
No, there's it's a series of books and they're ready to make more.
Really?
I think, or it's a series of scripts and they're ready to make more. But that is apparently the plan.
Wow.
And I don't want it.
No,
I don't need it.
No.
Let us not know. There's a wonderful pleasure in ambiguity and not knowing things. It doesn't mean it's being cruel to the audience. It just means that this is where the story ends. And for Emma, this is, this wasn't her life. It isn't anymore. We saw the period that mattered with this family, and now she's gone, and Eduardo is gone, and there is no more family. Right. The people who are left for a reason. Their stories will continue in separate directions, but the movie is over. So yeah, the grotto image, it's funny, I've discounted it in my head as just being a possible fantasy. But if it's real, then they've earned it. Certainly the two of them deserve it. I don't know, how do you feel?
I think they've earned it. I kind of like to believe that it's actually true. I know it doesn't really matter to me if it's a fantasy. I would like to think that they found each other, and that whatever it was going to be rough and ready.
Yeah. I mean, a couple facing an uncertain future is certainly dramatically valid. I can see that going there. Yeah. But I'm almost happy with the idea that we stay in the house and we never see her again, and we don't know what became of her, because that's how she'll be treated by the family. Right. She'll be this, my mom just
and then
went away.
There's Ito's fiancé, or wife, I guess by this point, who's like about to try and tell everyone, oh, by the way, I'm pregnant, right?
Yeah, well, that'll distract them.
Yeah.
It'll give them something else to be upset about, or to focus on.
Right.
But it is the sense of life going on and just not stopping because the movie's over that I find very contenting.
Yeah.
Contenting is a word. I'm making it a word. It's the sense that we've only been witness to a portion of the story makes it richer to me somehow than needing to know.
Yes.
Although now I'm mostly just channeling my own frustrations with the idea of a sequel to Call Me by Your Name. Even Suspiria ends with an extra little beat of something that is absolutely meaningless, but it's there. It's just a thing, a gesture that a character does that we get nothing out of when it happens, but it's just the sense of, well, this is the end point. This is what I'm doing to show you that the movie has ended. Here's a thing that happened that has no relevance, but this is where we've ended up. I kind of admire that about his storytelling.
Yes.
Even when he's willing to frustrate me, it's usually for a good cause.
Yes.
So the this kind of brings me to the other question in the podcast, which is, and you've sort of spoken about it already, is there something of I Am Love that you have appropriated or borrowed or stolen or incorporated into your own?
Well, certainly, I mean, it's not the same kind of film as what we were able to make, but from the point of view of it being the story about a woman trying to come to her own truth, it's was a starting point, inspiration for us in our film, because the characters are talking about the arts and a writing life. We are a lot more wordy in the process. We do a lot more, self-reflective examination of each other and ourselves. So it's a more roundabout turn of getting there. Things don't happen with quite the the sudden and ferocious, severity that they do in I Am Love.
But Into Invisible Light is a film about someone trying to decide if she wants that sort of intensity.
Yes.
And where that'll come from if she finds it.
Yes, but it's not likely to come from someone else. It's something that she needs to find within herself. And I hope that that's what we're left with at the end, is that that's what she has begun anyway. She's just embarked on this intention to try and find this voice again, this writing voice.
Did you pull anything from Swinton? Or is there anything other than, a certain tilt of the head? I didn't really catch anything.
I don't
but if
think
there's
so.
Something else.
No, I don't think so. But certainly, she is an actress who I've admired for so long, and there were other actresses and other performances that we were drawing inspiration from as, people that we were thinking about while we were creating this character for me to play. And Kristen Scott Thomas is one from several things that she's done, particularly a beautiful film called I've Loved You for So Long.
That was the thing I thought of when you mentioned her just now.
Yeah, and then also I was very taken with a role that Juliette Binoche played in something called Certified Copy.
Oh, yes.
Which is probably not something that a lot of people saw, but it was a movie again where a woman talked her way through something, right? I think she even had sections where she looked like she was just talking almost right into the camera, right? But she was, I admire that thing of not being afraid. Because we all know it's such a tenet in movies. It's movies, it's not theater. Don't oversay things. Don't, have too much dialogue. Show rather than say, but I like movies where people talk to each other. I like hearing people talk to each other. So I was always pushing for that in this script.
Just more dialogue, more...
It was a bit of a contentious issue between Sheila and I on more than one occasion in the development of the script and the rehearsal process where she would say, Jen, it's too much, we have to pull back, But, and in the end, of course, she wins because she's the director in the editing room. But, I don't think there's anything wrong with starting from more and then being able to whittle it away.
Yeah, certainly. And certainly the story of an actor writing more lines for herself this would not be the first time this has happened.
But I wrote some fabulous scenes and lines for other people too, so it wasn't just about that.
Good, as long as you have a larger project in mind.
Yeah.
My thanks to Jennifer Dale, whose new film Into Invisible Light opens this Friday, February 1st in Toronto, Winnipeg, and Vancouver. Thanks also to Suzanne Sheridan. She knows what she did. You can find Jennifer on Twitter at Jenny Ann Dale, all one word and with an E, and you can find I Am Love on Blu-ray and DVD from Mongrel Media in Canada and from Magnolia Entertainment in the US. It's also available on iTunes and Google Play. As always, you can find me on Twitter at Norm Wilner and elsewhere on the internet at nowtoronto.com. You can also find this podcast on Twitter at Semcast, SEMcast, and on the web at someoneelsesmovie.com. If you feel like leaving a review on iTunes or Apple Podcasts or wherever you enjoy the show, that would be greatly appreciated. Every little bit helps. It truly does. Thanks for your support, and thanks for listening.
I'm afraid you're just too darn loud.